Now, Ruben Shocron is his opponent here. Shocron was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, February 20th, 1921. He was Argentinian sub-champion in 1952. He immigrated here to the United States in 1960, winning state championships in Pennsylvania, Georgia, and New Mexico. He died in Pennsylvania, March 8th, 2013. No surprise to see E4. E5, knight F3, knight C6, bishop B5. No surprise, Bobby ever playing the Spanish game or the Ruy Lopez opening. Ruy Lopez de Segura, he was a Spanish monk who was definitely the top Spanish player in his day, maybe one of the best players in the world. Speaking of best players in the world, A6 is Morphy's defense, named for Paul Morphy. Paul Morphy was the best player in the world, definitely in the list of potential best players ever, according to Bobby Fischer himself, among others. Paul Morphy, Morphy's defense. This is the Columbus variation, and I've never been able to figure out why it's named the Columbus variation. Knight F6, castles, and bishop E7 is the closed Spanish variation. Rook E1, B5, bishop B3, D6, C3, castles. H3 is Polkedes' variation. Polkedes, another of the elite players of history from Estonia. Knight A5, hits the bishop, bishop C2, C5, D4, and we get Chigorin's defense. A two-time challenger for the World Championship was Mikhail Chigorin. Knight BD2, bishop D7, knight F1, king's rook to E8, knight E3. G6 is the Yugoslav system. Pawn takes the king's pawn, pawn takes the pawn. Here we have knight H2, queen's rook to D8, queen F3, bishop E6, the knight H to G4, knight takes the knight, and pawn takes the knight. You could take it with your knight as well, if you so desire. Now, queen C6 was played here to prevent knight D5, but it's marked inaccurate, and really it's not the most frequently played move. The bot preferring C4, the masters preferring knight to C4. Knight to C4 is answered by knight D5, bishop takes knight, pawn takes bishop, and then the knight comes back to B6. Rook comes over to D1, and rook D6, okay? All right, anyway, Shocron here played queen C6 to get another pair of eyes on the D5 square so that knight D5 cannot be played. Bobby with G5, that gets a question mark. Queen G3 is played more often, and that's typically answered by F6. In this game, G5. Here, knight C4. If you play bishop takes the pawn, I mean, you've got to assume that Bobby put it there to be taken. But then on knight D5, rook takes D5. And on pawn takes rook, wow, I get a double exclam for that. On pawn takes rook, the bishop takes here, right? So early double exclam for Coach Daniel. So after G5, knight C4 was played. Knight G4, bishop takes G4, queen takes the bishop. Now this position Bobby will reach again later in the same year. We'll see it when he plays at Zurich. He reaches this position against Wolfgang Unzicker. But Unzicker did not play knight B6. He played pawn F6. The bot not liking pawn F6. G3 here. C4. King G2. Knight D7. Rook H1. Knight F8. Pawn B4. I thought queen F3 might be a stronger move here. The bot calling for pawn A4. I get a thumbs up for my move. Queen E6. You can take this en passant and remain equal. What did the bot say to play? The bot said A5. But if you take en passant, bishop takes rook D3 here probably. Now you might say, well, I'll just take the pawn with my queen, but that will allow bishop e3, and if you're not careful, your queen's going to be in peril. So there is some poison in the pawn. Doesn't matter because c takes b3 was not even played in this game. Queen e6 was the choice. Queen e2, and yeah, once again, queen f3 is solid here. Pawn a5, pawn takes the pawn. Queen a6. The bot prefers to attack this pawn with the rook. It's awfully hard to vacate this open file, though. You don't want to relinquish control there, do you? No doubt that's why Shocron chose his queen rather than his rook. Bishop e3 with the threat of bishop b6. The bot wanting to put the question to the b-man with a4. Play that first, I suppose. Because it doesn't really matter because black is going to take this pawn anyway, isn't he? And then you can play bishop b3 in either case. Or bishop b2, I suppose. Bishop e3 here. All right, so queen takes the pawn here in either case. a4, rook a8, knight e6, super attacking the g-man does make some sense. Perhaps you can capture this c-man first. Oh, yep, gives me a star. It gave me an inaccurate at first, then changed it. A takes b5 and knight e6 would be the line if queen takes c3. All right, well, rook a8 was played, and pawn takes the pawn. Queen takes the pawn, king's rook to b1. Queen c6, rook b6, defended by the bishop. White is pushing here, isn't he? Queen c7, and now he doubles his rooks on the a file. Rook b a6. Rook captures the rook, and rook captures the rook. And next comes rook a7, defended by our bishop. Rook c8. He did not play rook a7. I thought he would. That's what I was expectorating. Instead, he played queen g4. And the bot calling for bishop a4. I still like the idea of rook a7. It creates a skewer, so that means the queen has to go either to d8 or d6 because the queen has to maintain a defensive look at this bishop. And when he does, then queen d1. Coming back, queen g4 was played instead. Now knight e6 is played. Bishop c5 would put the question to white's bishop. Make white make a decision. I mean, I think rook b8 should also be considered. Get a star for that as well. But knight e6 is the move. Now bishop a4. And here there's a nifty little sacrifice you can play. He played bishop a4. I really want rook takes the knight. That is the best move, though, according to the bot. I had this idea of rook takes knight here. 2 double exclams on the first game already. And after pawn takes, queen takes with check. And on king f8, now we overwork the queen. Our queen is looking at the rook. The rook is defended by the queen, and therefore this square is safe for our bishop. And the point is, the queen is overworked. So it cannot, well, I guess you could give the exchange back, right? If you try to escape here, I might just point out that the queen is still overworked and play here. Doesn't like it. My point is that black cannot capture that bishop without giving back the exchange. That's all I'm trying to illustrate here. And with tempo, no less. So my second double exclam, Bobby playing bishop a4. Rook b8 here, rook c6 hitting the queen, and apparently rook takes knight is still available, which is why this is a blunder. Captain Blunderpants! He needed to defend the knight. But look how hard it is to play that. How are you going to play your queen right in line with your opponent's bishop? So somehow you have to gird up your loins and play queen in line with the enemy bishop to stay equal. The problem here is the tactic I showed earlier, and Bobby plays it here. He had 2 chances already. This is his 3rd chance, and this time he plays it. rook takes, and he gets a double exclam. No surprise. Shocron tries to pin the rook to the queen here. If you take, once again, it's queen takes with check, and after king f8, queen takes the pawn, right? Let's do a nothing move and show the threat there. After here, you can play queen h8, and the king's forced here. Notice the bishop is covering e8. So the king's forced here, then queen h7. This bishop's going to come up and control these squares potentially. But, right, well, if he comes to e6, I'm taking the g-man with check. If he comes to f8, I'm coming here threatening checkmate on the next turn, forcing him to give up his queen. All right. So that's why he didn't take with the pawn. Instead, he tried pinning the rook to the queen, but Bobby brilliantly once again shows his tactical genius. Bishop d7, and black resigned. Remarkable game. Shocron, just with the one blunder, was right there with Fischer all the way. That one move with the queen made all the difference on move 38. Now let me show you why this can't be taken. Well, the queen's undefended on that square. So we give check, and when he gets out of check, we win his queen. So he wouldn't be able to take. So what could he do? Well, I suppose he could slide over here to safety. But look at that eval bar as we begin to clean up our opponent. And we're up a full bishop here. So for that reason, after the brilliant bishop d7, Ruben Shocron resigned. Let me tell you how strong this was. 97.3 accuracy for Bobby Fischer. 93.2 accuracy for Ruben Shocron. You would want a 93 accuracy every game. Ruben gets 93.2 and loses. Single game rating for Fischer, 2,900. 2,900 single game rating, according to the analysis bot here. Ruben Shocron played at a 2,600 level. And so a very tight game until the one blunder. Very good opening for both. Very good and well-fought middle game for both. But that one blunder, and an understandable blunder. Who wants to move in line with their opponent's attacker?